Connected Homeschooling, Episode 14.
Hey, this is Fletch.
And this is Kendra.
From the Homeschooling in Real Life podcast, or as we like to call it,
Homeschooling IRL.
You know, Kenj, homeschooling can be difficult when you try and do it alone.
Yes, it can. And so, we would encourage you to stay connected with Devin Dabney of Connected Homeschooling.
Welcome to the Connected Homeschooling Podcast, where we connect homeschooling families like yours with leaders, authors, speakers, and all-around interesting people who provide great conversations, tips, and advice. Now here's your host, Devin Dabney.
Well, hello, and thank you for joining me on this very last episode of Connected Homeschooling for 2013. This week, my guest is Barry Dunlap. He's the president of our local Christian Home Educators Fellowship, and he's here to share his homeschooling journey, information about CHEF of Baton Rouge, and also about some of his entrepreneurial ventures. He's preparing to launch a podcast, and he's been active in social media, so we're going to discuss his journey and also some valuable resources for our listeners, especially the local listeners in Baton Rouge. So stay tuned for that interview with Barry Dunlap. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest this week is Barry Dunlap. He's a husband of nearly 18 years, and he and his wife have 4 beautiful children that they homeschool. He's also the president of CHEF of Baton Rouge, and he's my guest today. Welcome to the show, Barry.
Hey, Devin. Good to be here.
All right, well, I'm glad to have you here, and this is actually a recording for our last episode of Connected Homeschooling for 2013. So I wanted to end this on a great note, and I figured you're somebody that has inspired me and also many others within the state of Louisiana and also in the city of Baton Rouge. And so I wanted to bring you on and just share your story. I know a lot of our listeners are locals and people that I've met before, and we just wanted to take some time and discuss what's going on with you, also what's going on with CHEF, and also some of your entrepreneurial ventures. So what we like to do at the beginning of the show is to just have our guests tell us a little bit about themselves or even their family. Just introduce us to yourself.
Okay, Devin. Well, thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm just honored to be your guest, and it's been great getting to know you and serving the Baton Rouge area in CHEF of Baton Rouge. And just a little bit about my family. You mentioned my wife and I have been married for almost 18 years. We have 4 kids that are a tremendous blessing and also tremendous work all at the same time. And we are. I've said for a number of years that I feel like God uses children to chisel away at our selfishness, and I think some of us need more chiseling than others. And but I say that kind of in jest, but they're just a tremendous blessing, and my wife and I have grown so much just from homeschooling our children and just the ways that they challenge us to think and to continue to learn and grow, and other areas such as music and different aspects of the arts that they have a love for, and they share that with us.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and I agree with you. They definitely have a way of stretching us, and they also take that selfishness out of us, and it's all working for our good. So one of the reasons that we do this show is to encourage the listeners, and I find that an effective way of doing that is to begin with a scripture or a quote. Do you have one that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, one of my favorite inspirational characters from American history, I guess, is I'm not going way back, but Coach John Wooden, who was the head coach of the UCLA basketball team, the Bruins. And he's got many inspirational quotes. One of my favorites is, "When you're through learning, you're through." And that's one just to that I'm constantly reminded of, and just as a personal challenge to continue to embrace learning.
A great quote, and definitely one of our mantras in our family. because like you said in the quote, when you're through learning, you're through. And lifelong learning is what we're all about, and it seems like that's how you live as well. Well, what we'll do is jump into your homeschooling journey. A lot of people arrive at homeschooling in many different ways, and I'm always curious to ask our guests how they got into homeschooling. And so just tell us about your story and what got you and your wife into homeschooling.
Okay, I'd love to share that. And I think my story is pretty typical of most homeschooling dads and husbands. My wife kind of dragged me into it. When our oldest was about 4 years old, I guess she may have actually been about 3, my wife told me one day, she said, I think God wants us to homeschool. And I didn't really know what to make of that. I was educated in a public school, and in fact, I was at that point, a certified public school teacher. I'm a recovering English teacher, I like to say. And anyway, she said that, and I said, well, okay, let's pray about it. And kindergarten rolled around, and I just said, well, let's give it a try. And I'll go ahead and say one of my biggest regrets in homeschooling relates to that. For the first probably 3 or 4 years that we homeschooled, my approach was, let's try it this year and see how it goes, with the thinking that, we'll probably enter the public school system at some point. Let's just try it and see how it goes. That's one of my biggest regrets, and that was really my approach as we got started. I'm thankful that God put on the heart of my wife to invest in our children to that level, and it was years later. I guess I'm a slow learner, but years later when I began to see, wow, this is not just about academics. Yes, academics are important, but this is more about discipleship. This is about having a relationship with our children, about casting vision for becoming an adult. It's about growing in the knowledge and understanding of our Lord, and it's about discipleship. So once that light bulb came on for me, I was sold. But it took a while, and I'm just thankful that my wife was patient with me and didn't give up before the light came on.
Well, that's great to hear, and it's interesting how you called yourself a recovering English instructor. But I think we all can learn from each other's homeschooling journey, and there's so many different styles and different methods of homeschooling, and one thing that I know differs from family to family is just even curriculum choices. And so what are some that your family have utilized, or what have you chosen to use for educating your children?
Yeah, and I apologize for laughing, but when we get this question, we go, wow, okay, what have we not tried? I talked to my wife earlier today and just said, honey, refresh me in case I'm forgetting anything, but the one word that she used primarily for the long view of our 12 and a half years of homeschooling is eclectic. That's been our journey. It's been eclectic. It's been a mix. And, we started out using just basic, even workbooks for phonics and math, even some books that, or maybe public school books that were given to us. Just kind of wandered into it that way. We even used things like Hooked on Phonics, and we moved ahead to things like Math UC and Sunlight, which was really good, but time intensive, a lot of reading there. We used some of my father's world, teaching textbooks for math. We went back to sunlight again. We've used answers in Genesis. And then we started moving more into the classical education. This was something that was hidden to us. We, she and I both were educated in public school, and, I even have a degree in education, yet I had never heard about classical education. And so as we started reading and coming across the trivium and things like that, it just kind of blew our minds. We thought, wow, how can something be so simple but so profound? And how can we as a generation and as our country with public education, how could we have gotten so far from this and missed out on so much? So we've moved into the realm of classical education, and we've done that mostly by using Veritas Press curriculum. And we also did a year with Classical Conversations, which is kind of a co-op that's geared toward classical education.
Okay. You mentioned co-ops, and I know that's something that we participate in as well. But one of the questions that always comes up is, what about socialization? And I guess, how do you address that question? Because with you being a leader and people probably coming up to you with concerns even in the early days, surely socialization is one of the concerns. How do you address that?
Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? That's the one that someone standing in line at the post office always asks at the worst possible day, it seems. But socialization, yeah, you can address this from so many different angles. But we have 4 children, and I like to say there's no solitude and peace and quiet for any of us in our home. We have busy days. There's never a dull moment. And I think when people talk about socialization and they're concerned about that, they're concerned about knowing how to interact with other people. And that's one of the blessings of growing up. I'm speaking of my children, growing up in a somewhat larger family. Today a family of 6 is considered large, and it doesn't seem large to us, but it's, that I think it's built in. God designed the family to meet those needs. And, when you think about putting 28 6th graders sitting in rows in a concrete building, that just doesn't seem very natural to me. Thank God he didn't give us 25 12-year-olds all at the same time. He knows what he's doing with the design of families, and I think he knows what he's doing with socialization as well.
A great answer, and I agree with you. Now, you mentioned people mentioning that exactly at the wrong time. We all as homeschoolers face some challenges, and I'm sure you're not exempt from that. What are some of the challenges that you faced in your time, I guess, even from the beginning, or some that you face now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Devin, and it's one that's very real. I kind of hinted at it earlier, but I'll just be explicit. One of the biggest challenges for me has just been early on, my lack of vision for home education. And with that came the lack of support from my wife. And I feel like, as I've grown as a person, as a husband, as a father, just trying to be more supportive and more involved in the vision of what we're doing with our children. And that's a constant struggle. I think as men we face the challenge of passivity on a daily basis. I mean, we'll go out into the marketplace and we'll fight hard for that promotion to meet those sale goals or whatever kind of goals we're working on. But then we come home and we want to kick our feet up and act like we're a king and have our family serve us. And, I find that to be a huge challenge because as a homeschooling dad, I cannot be effective in casting vision and supporting my wife if I'm passive. I've got to be engaged, and I've got to think about the long-term view, not just, can we make it through this week, but, where are we, how are we equipping our children, and are we aiming them in the right direction?
Wow, that was definitely a challenge to me, and also I'm sure some of the listeners, especially dads out there. And we definitely have to keep the vision ahead of us. And I agree that I was definitely like you at the beginning, just thinking, okay, we'll give this a try, and just kind of passively going through it and saying that we'll take a look year by year. And it wasn't really something we were fully committed to or just recognizing the benefits of that. So I think really what you said is a challenge to all of us. It's something that I'll definitely be listening to this interview over and over, even to get that piece. But we're going to transition here and just talk about your role with the CHEF of Baton Rouge and also just some of the projects and things that you have going on in the entrepreneurial realm. So you're the president of, as I mentioned before, of CHEF of Baton Rouge. And how long have you been a part of CHEF and some of these homeschooling organizations around Louisiana or even Baton Rouge?
Yeah, good question, Devin. Really not that long, surprisingly. We live a little bit outside of Baton Rouge, and, we have been members of CHEF for probably about 5 years, maybe 6, but we were kind of, we would go to kickoff or some of the maybe the used curriculum sale, things like that we would hear about from friends, but we were kind of slow in coming on as members. It wasn't until our children were getting a little bit older and we were looking for some of the events and activities, for fellowship with other like-minded homeschooling believers.
What are some of the benefits of people being a part of CHEF?
CHEF is a volunteer, and I guess I should say that up front. You mentioned my role in it as president. CHEF is a fully volunteer organization, so I work with the other board members to serve the organization, and we're just doing it because we believe in the mission of homeschooling. We believe in really the voice that CHEF gives to homeschoolers in the Baton Rouge area and beyond that in Louisiana, and then beyond that on the national level. But really one of the biggest benefits, as I see it, of being a member of CHEF is that you are pulling together with other like-minded homeschooling families to make your voice heard. And, we live in days where, right now in Louisiana, we've got great homeschool laws. We, thankfully, to a lot of work that's been done years ago, we benefit from that. We don't have the kind of pressures on us from legal entities or from school districts or the Department of Education that other states encounter. But there's no guarantee that it's going to stay that way. And as CHEF of Baton Rouge, as this organization, we pull together and we make our voice heard, and we stand for the right to home educate. That it's a God-given right, and if the time comes where that's challenged, we need to be ready to stand together and make our voices heard. And in fact, we need to be watchfully alert and, looking at the horizon to see, are things going on that may challenge that, and be ready to act. Beyond that, though, Devin, we've got, I kind of touched on activities and events. Sometimes home education can be very lonely, and especially for moms. We've got local support groups in different parts of the city where, especially for moms of younger children, they can get together with people in their area to just maybe meet at a park or take a field trip. And it's good because kids get to play with friends, but moms need that time to just encourage each other and listen to each other and maybe talk about curriculum. And so I think those local support groups are so important. And we also have different events that CHEF sponsors throughout the year. We just finished up the Ladies' Christmas Tea, which is really, in the past, has been focused on mothers, daughters, and even grandmothers. And we've kind of expanded it to say, you don't have to be a mother of a daughter. This Christmas Tea is a great opportunity to just come together and have a great time to focus on Christ and celebrate his birth. So thankful to Sherry Arnold and Priscilla for putting that on and leading that event. We had the father-son camp out back in November, had a great time there. We've got a father-daughter picnic coming up in the spring, and we're looking forward to another great round of graduation ceremonies. The kindergarten graduation is always a blast, and the senior graduation is just such an incredible time. If you've never been to a senior graduation for CHEF, I would encourage you to check it out. It will really give you vision for going the distance. And I'm just blown away by the talent and the abilities that are displayed at those senior graduation ceremonies.
Yeah, and as I look at this acronym CHEF, I really think that the F in CHEF definitely stands out. Now, that's been the fellowship. It's been really a blessing to my wife. You mentioned the T, and she and my daughters were able to participate in that the last couple of years. And she's met so many people, and then I've actually had the opportunity to meet some homeschooling dads such as yourself through the fellowshipping times and events. So I think for our family, it's definitely the most valuable thing for us. And also, as you mentioned, staying abreast of what's going on with legislation or different things that would affect the homeschooling family in Louisiana. It's always great to get legislative updates or find out different things that would affect us. And I think that's really a great part of just being a member of CHEF. And you covered a lot about CHEF, and I'll link up to the CHEF website in the show notes for this episode. And I believe this is episode 14 of the podcast. And so our listeners can go to connectedhomeschooling.com/episode 14, and they'll be able to find some of the links to what you've mentioned and what we've discussed here in the conversation.
Yeah. Devin, I'd like to mention one more thing. Sorry to jump in there, but I also want to mention about kind of our parent group is CHEF of Louisiana. And, the mission is the same. The scope is just a little bit larger. And we have a great leadership team in CHEF of Louisiana. And one of the big things that they do several things for the local groups like CHEF of Baton Rouge. But one of the big things they do is put on a convention each year. And this year, it's the 27th annual homeschooling convention. It's going to be in Baker. The last weekend of April 25th and 26th. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Todd Wilson is one of the keynote speakers who's going to be there. And there's always a vendor hall, and just all kind of breakout sessions and keynotes, and it's just a very encouraging time. So the incredible thing about convention is it is a great front porch for people who are considering homeschooling. You may be listening to this program and thinking about homeschooling, but you haven't done it, you don't know where to start. Convention in April would be a great time to come to learn more, to talk with some people, and just kind of get ready to put your foot in.
I agree. There are definitely a lot of resources available, and you mentioned Todd Wilson of Family Man Ministries. If listeners haven't heard from him before, then they definitely would be in for a treat to attend the convention and hear him. But either way, you have people who are new just like you, and they may be coming into homeschooling right along with you, but then there are also the veterans who have been around for some time. And it would definitely benefit anyone to attend the convention. We've been able to participate the last several years, and it's been something that we were able to fellowship and connect with people that we don't see all of the time. But what we'll do is transition into a little discussion about some of your projects. I know that you're a writer and English buff, and so I've been able to connect with you on some social media and other ventures because of some of our like interests. And you're, as I understand, preparing to launch a podcast. Tell us a little bit about the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited about the podcast, and linking back to that John Wooden quote. I've never been real tech savvy. I've known just enough to be dangerous, as most people say, but I've really been challenged to embrace it more and to try to get out of my shell and learn more about the technology that avails itself to us. And so doing this podcast is causing me to grow and challenging me. And so I just decided to do a podcast related to the creative process, and I'm calling it 12-Minute Muse. And the goal is to interview musicians, novelists, poets, people who have been published in the creative arts, and just discuss the creative process. The muse, as it's referred. What is it about writing a song or creating an album or writing a book or a poem? How do you do that? And what is it about that magical, that mysterious spark that ignites, that causes you to chase an idea all the way to completion? That's what I'm looking at with 12-Minute Muse. And I've got the website up. I'm also on Twitter at the number 12-Minute Muse on Twitter. The website is 12 spelled out 12minutemuse.com. And I'm doing the interviews, getting them edited, and planning to launch sometime in January to start the brand new year with the podcast out there.
Well, that's great. We look forward to checking that out. And also, along with that, I know that you mentioned about the technology piece and knowing enough to be dangerous, and I think we've been able to help each other out. As the Word of God says that iron sharpens iron. I think that you've mentioned some things about having a desire to do some coaching and just consulting and helping people out as a natural teacher. I think you've done that for me, and I've had the opportunity to do that for you. And I think that people would benefit from just checking out your resource and things, just connecting with you as a resource for them, whether it's homeschooling or just in character development or making some decisions and having a brother in the Lord as someone you're getting coaching from. So I think you're a great resource for for any of us, especially homeschooling dads. So
Well,
I'll link up to I'll link up to your podcast and also to the blog there, so people will have an opportunity to check that out as soon as it's released.
Well, thank you. I just want to say that you've been very encouraging and challenging to me in all kind of good ways, and I appreciate you, bro, and just thankful that God has brought you into my life. It's always good to have somebody who you get beyond all the wonderful fellowship that we have and the like-mindedness. It's always good when you get in a jam with a computer to say, okay, who can I get some help from? And you've always been there to help me, and you're a big blessing to me.
Well, I appreciate that. And we're going to jump into this last segment of the interview, which is called 7 with Devin. And I think this is going to give an idea for our listeners of some resources they should check out, just some things, possibly even some interesting things about you that they might not know. So I'll just jump in and give the questions, and you give me your best answer.
Okay, great.
Well, the first 2 questions, I'd like to pair those together. What's the top free resource that you'd recommend to listeners? And then the second one is, what's the top paid resource? So whether this is a software package or a program, curriculum, anything, a free resource and then a paid resource. Okay.
And I'm actually going to maybe cheat a little bit here and give you 3. HSLDA is just an incredible resource. And if you're new to homeschooling, even if you're not new to homeschooling, you need to check out HSLDA. There's so much information that's available for free on their website about what's going on around the nation, around the world, in our state. And it's just a wealth of information. By the way, HSLDA, that stands for Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And you can also, and I would encourage you, if you're a home educator, to join HSLDA, to become a member, because by joining, if you need legal representation, you will have it. But it's not just about my needs. It's about, as a member of HSLDA, I become, again, part of that voice for the freedom to home educate. And by being paying for membership, I help others who are in states or in other countries who are being persecuted for this. And it's just a great opportunity to stand together for the freedom that we have. Another resource that, especially for high school parents who are homeschooling, it's not exactly free, but it's very affordable. academicrecords.net. academicrecords.net is a site, kind of a portal, if you will, where you can go in and design and store data for your high school transcript for your students. You name your school, you put in the courses that your child's taking, you put in you can do letter grades, you can do percentages, you can do credits, however you want to do it. And you store that in a secured location at academicrecords.net. And the only thing you pay is when you get ready to print out a copy of the transcript. I think you pay $15 for a printed copy of the transcript. And yeah, if you're sending a dozen of those to universities, then it's gonna add up there. But for most of us, this is a great bargain. And especially for high school homeschoolers, we always get the questions, how do you do a transcript? I just don't know. Well, this is a great answer to that question. academicrecords.net. And then one of the things that we have done in home education, as personally as our children have gotten older, we've supplemented some of our instruction. With 4 children, as they are getting into high school, it's just impossible to juggle everything and to keep them as engaged as they need to be. So we, about 4 years ago, started, our oldest child started taking some courses through Veritas Press Scholars Academy, which is an online classical Christian school. And that's been a big blessing to us. 2 of our children have participated with Veritas Press Scholars Academy, not full-time, but just supplementally. And they've really enjoyed it. They've learned tremendous amounts, and we've learned too. And so Veritas Press offers that virtual academy that you can do to any. I mean, you can take one class, you can take all your classes if you wanted to. But Veritas Press also has a great catalog of resources. They're a very thorough provider of classical curriculum.
And you mentioned some resources that some of them, which I haven't heard about before, so I'll definitely link up to those in the show notes and just make sure people are able to check those out. Now, if you think back to 12, 13 years ago when you were starting your homeschool journey, what would be the first step if you were able to start over?
And I think I kind of mentioned that earlier. Me personally, my first step would be stay engaged so I can be supportive and encouraging to my wife. But beyond that, really, if I could go back and do it over, and I guess part of it is a learning process that we go through, but if I could go back and do it over, I would begin with the end in mind. I would start from the beginning, from kindergarten or first grade, whatever, and say, okay, what do we want at the end of the 12th grade year for each of our children? And just begin, commit to it then, instead of this approach of, well, we'll try it this year and see how it goes. And I find this in many areas of life. If we just have the trench mentality of, can we make it through this week? We don't usually produce quality whenever our vision is so limited. If we can step back and look a little bit more long term and say, okay, what are our goals? What do we want to see in 5 years, in 10 years, in 12 years? That will help us determine the direction we're moving in instead of just going from week to week.
Well, I agree with you. As you were saying that, it really made me think of some of the parallels between the homeschooling process and then thinking about your marriage. You don't really go into your marriage thinking, all right, we'll just try it for this week, and if it doesn't work out, then we'll just try something different. You kind of look at it as, all right, I'm investing in something that's going to be lifelong or something that's long term. And I think when you look at homeschooling that way, it really helps you prepare better, and you're just knowing that, hey, I'm committed to this and seeing it out to get the best results, and I'm going to do what's best for my children. So I agree with you on that, and I believe you've reiterated it, and I think it's important enough to give it that attention. And we probably have some new homeschooling families who are listening to this, and what would be your best advice speaking to new homeschooling families?
Serving on the board with CHEF, I get calls from people all the time asking questions about homeschooling. And one of the things that I try to communicate is, number one, take the pressure off of yourself. I think as brand new homeschoolers, we all feel it. We all felt it. And, there's this idea we've got schooling in mind, and we think we've got to have a desk and we've got to have it in one room, and we've got to make sure that our clocks are set and, everything's got to run like it did. And maybe we need a bell. I don't know. But it's got to look just like when we were in school. And that's really a paradigm shift that occurs, I find, when I talk with homeschoolers. It's something that shifts from the idea of schooling to the idea of education. And it takes a little while to get there sometimes, but I would just encourage first-time homeschoolers. Your child is going to get so much more from a shorter amount of time of you investing one-on-one than he or she would sitting all day in a class of 25 or 28 kids who are just dying to get up, move around, and make each other laugh. And so take a little pressure off. You don't have to sit them in a desk for 6 hours a day. Look for opportunities to learn in areas they're interested. Always be looking for that teachable moment.
We talked about earlier maybe some challenges, but what has been your greatest reward, and then what's been your greatest challenge as a homeschooling dad?
Yeah, I think I touched on the challenge, and that's always there, just about being engaged and casting vision. The greatest reward for me, I just want to mention two things. One of the greatest rewards is the relationship. Earlier this afternoon, I was at home and had a little bit of time, and I'm working on a fence project, and so I had my son come out and help me set a couple of posts, and just the opportunity to be teaching him how to do that. I missed out on so much of that growing up. My dad, I had a great family. My parents are a big blessing to me, but my dad worked, long hours every week, and I would be going off to public school, and, the only time that he had to work around the house, it seemed like was on a Saturday, and he was in such a hurry to get things done that when I would try to help him, I didn't know what I was doing because I never had the opportunity to help. And he would be in such a hurry that he would get frustrated with me for not knowing how to do it. And it really, it slowed down my development as a person in those areas. So the blessing of being able to show my children how to do things because they're not in such a time crunch. The other thing, probably the biggest blessing, and I mentioned my dad, and one of the greatest rewards. We've been at home education for 12 and a half years, and it was about 2 years ago that my dad finally gave me the blessing on homeschooling. I was at his house, and we were just visiting and talking about different things, and something came up, and he said, "Oh, by the way, while we're mentioning, I just want to tell you, I was really doubted early on about y'all teaching the kids at home and everything, but you've done a good job, and I'm really pleased with the way your kids are turning out." And man, that was just, wow, that was the reward, that was to get the blessing. And, we all desire to hear that from our parents, that blessing of you've done good and you're doing the right thing. And my parents, they always wanted what was best for their grandkids, but they just didn't know about homeschooling, and they were scared and really ignorant about homeschooling. And so it was tough for us to get out there and endure knowing that they were doubting it, but we stuck with it and we got the blessing. And our hope is that our children will continue with it, and we'll break that cycle, and from here on the generations will not have to endure that difficulty.
And I think you've inspired some of us who have possibly dealt with the same situation. It's probably a theme with a lot of the guests I've had on this show that they've probably had some opposition, or a lot of it was just ignorance, or just something new that a lot of times our parents or other people who are around us may not be familiar with. And so there is that initial hesitation from us or from even our parents or other relatives. And I think your story is definitely encouraging in that regard. And people can realize that, hey, there may be a reward, for an earthly reward, even in just some of the comments that people will make, and as they see progress and they see what happens with your children and their educational process, and even just the character development, more importantly. Well, we're going to end the interview and end this segment with something on a light note. I like to discover some unique talents or characteristics about people that many of us may not know. So what's something unique about you or some characteristic that you'd like to share?
Well, Devin, I'll share a family secret, I guess. My children refer to me as the ice cream monster. And there's no flavor of ice cream, no brand or flavor of ice cream that's safe in the house with me around. And so that's kind of been a joke through the years, but I do love ice cream, and that's one of the things that we laugh about.
All right. Well, that's something I definitely didn't know. So, the ice cream monster. All right. Well, I want people to reach out to you, and we've talked about CHEF, and we'll link up to that in the show notes. But where are some of the places that people can find you online?
Yeah, I blog a little bit. I have a personal blog, and that's at landofmysojournblog.blogspot.com, and I am on Twitter. Also, we have CHEF of Baton Rouge is on Twitter. That would be a great place if if someone in the listening audience wants to know what's going on with Twitter. In the Twitter sphere, I guess you'd say, we often will retweet things from HSLDA or things. Sometimes we'll put pictures from different events up, but we do tweet from time to time with CHEF of Baton Rouge. And also, again, as you so graciously mentioned earlier, with the 12-Minute Muse site and that podcast to launch very soon. But I am on Facebook as well.
All right. Well, we'll link up to that in the show notes and to share ways people can reach out and connect with you. And Barry, it's been a pleasure having you on the Connected Homeschooling podcast. I know that our listeners have gained lots of insight from our time today, and I just wanted to tell you I sincerely appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Devin. It's been an honor to be your guest and just to talk about these things that are so important to us. And I thank you for the privilege to be here.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for 2013. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the podcast over these last 14 or 15 weeks. And it's been a pleasure to bring interviews with our guests and also do a spotlight on my own homeschooling journey. So if you've enjoyed any of these episodes, I'd love to hear from you during the holidays. And I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I hope that 2014 will be the best year of your life and that we'll be able to bring you even more valuable information and interviews and to be a source of encouragement, inspiration, and education for you. God bless you.